All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of California Underground. I am fortunate enough to have Assemblyman Kevin Kiley again with me to do a follow-up interview, get some more of his insight about what's going on. How are you doing today, Assemblyman?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you for coming on. So let's just jump right into it. I know your time, you're very busy between being Assemblyman and running for governor. It's been several weeks since you've jumped into the race. And I want to get your feel for how's the campaign going? What's the number one issue you're hearing from people on the ground right now?
Well, the campaign's going very well. The recall has considerable momentum. It's neck and neck. No one gave this a shot, and now the polls show that it's really a dead heat. Our own campaign continues to gain momentum and rise in the polls. And everywhere I go, there's just an extraordinary level of enthusiasm and energy and hope, the likes of which I haven't seen at all, anything like it in my time in politics. And so, people can sense that we are really on the verge of something powerful here where we can get our state moving in a whole other direction. And there are so many issues that are pertinent to why Gavin Newsom needs to be removed, whether it's the school shutdown, the lockdowns, or all of the problems that are endemic to California that he's made worse, like homelessness and crime and housing and the overall cost of living and our infrastructure. And, the list goes on. But ultimately, the overarching, I think, premise of this recall is we need a government that actually serves the people of California. So this is a movement for the people of our state to reclaim control of their government and to have a governor who actually, has their interests at heart rather than, running the state into the ground in order to benefit special interests.
Now, in terms of playing politics, Gavin Newsom is kind of an expert at it. There's a sense that he's holding off on restrictions or further mandates right now at the state level because of the recall. Do you believe that if he's not recalled, that on September 15th, he's really going to drop the hammer on Californians?
Well, it's hard to say what he'll do. I mean, we know that this governor does whatever he views as being in his political interest. So actually, he has just in the last few days imposed new mandates for nurses, healthcare workers, teachers that literally no other state has. And this is so typical of the COVID era in California is we have been a total national outlier when it comes to lockdowns, when it comes to school closures, when it comes to mandates. We've been just last in the country or the worst in the country, the most restrictive, the most controlling, the least liberty in the country. And we've had the worst outcomes of any state in the country. And it's clear with these mandates, he's trying to create a political wedge issue for the election. And so, he's using teachers and nurses as pawns. So it's just another reason why he needs to go, is so that we have a governor who actually, has basic decency as a guiding value rather than this governor who, simply does whatever in his political interest.
Do you believe that the healthcare vaccine is necessary? Maybe get your take on, if you were governor, would you enact something like this? And also, a lot of people are asking about what's your take on employers in California who are starting to mandate the vaccine?
Well, I would roll back all of the mandates. I think this is a matter of personal choice. And I've always said that this should be available to anyone who wants it, but it should not be mandatory for anyone. And there should be no compulsion or coercion involved. And I would think this should be just pretty basic. I mean, it's just such a fundamental, notion of individual liberty and autonomy and privacy. And the fact that the governor here, Gavin Newsom, is, taking us further in the opposite direction than any other state, it just shows you why, California has suffered so much throughout the COVID-19 era. We've had the worst, education outcomes with our school closures. We've had the second highest unemployment rate throughout the COVID era. And we've had some of the worst public health outcomes as well. Our overall mortality rate, when you factor in things like drug overdoses, suicides, delayed medical treatments along with COVID, has been about the fifth or sixth worst in the entire country. If we even were on par with the national average, thousands more Californians would be alive today. So it's, what we've grown used to as Californians. We sacrifice the most and we get the least in return. Gavin Newsom's approach has clearly been a total failure. Other states who during COVID took a more balanced approach, who trusted their citizens, who followed the science actually, rather than just saying they were, have done a lot better. And that's what I'd do as governor.
So last week, you were part of the first debate amongst three other Republican candidates. So first off, how do you think it went?
I thought it went very well. We all, I think, were able to keep our fire aimed at Gavin Newsom and to use that platform to make the case against him and for why we need fundamental change in California.
And that kind of leads me directly into my next question is my personal takeaway was that it seemed more like a forum where it was a pile on of Gavin Newsom rather than like a true debate. Did you think it was better that it was all aimed at Gavin Newsom? Or do you think there could have been a little bit more of a debate to differentiate the candidates rather than, well, we all don't like Gavin Newsom?
Well, I think that it's important that we actually consider ourselves to be on the same team as the candidates on the replacement on the second question, because that's what's different about a recall from an ordinary election is that it's bifurcated. There are two questions on the ballot. Number one, do you want to remove Newsom? Number two, who should replace him? And if we don't get over 50% on that first question, then none of us becomes governor. So we all have that common interest in voting to remove him. And so that is where the focus ought to be. And in terms of the candidates differentiating themselves among one another, I happen to think that it's whoever best makes the case against Newsom, whoever shows most effectively that they would lead the state in a totally different direction, that they are Gavin Newsom's polar opposite. I think that will be the person who rises to the top on the second question.
If you were a Democrat or like independent tuning into last week's debate, do you think they got a lot out of the debate, or if they were on the fence about the recall or not, do you believe that kind of pushed them over the edge in terms of voting yes on the recall?
Yeah, I think that, we were able to reach a lot of people, Democrats, independents, who have been a big part of this movement from the beginning, because, I think that they really, that people are seeing that Gavin Newsom's failures are not, anything that affects only people of one party. I have people who have donated to my campaign who say the only person they've ever given to before is Bernie Sanders, but they just want to get their kids back in school. So what's at issue here is something much more basic, something much more fundamental than our usual partisan differences and disagreements. It's about having a government that actually serves the people of our state. I talk about getting back to basics. I mean, let's pave our roads, let's manage our forests, store our water, maintain our grid, fund our police, do the things government's supposed to do them well, and do nothing else. And I think that's a message that is appealing to people who throughout the state have seen their quality of life decline, and have seen that more than ever the last year and a half, when, for example, their kids are stuck at home when Gavin Newsom's are in school. There's no good reason for it. And so I think that, we are seeing, as more and more people are even paying closer attention to the recall as the vote nears, support for it is only continuing to grow. And I think the debate was helpful in that.
Would you hypothetically participate in a debate, in a future debate that had more candidates and possibly candidates who are not Republican?
Sure. I mean, I'm willing to, take any opportunity to get our message out, because I think it's the right message and I think people are responding to it.
So one last question about the debate. You were asked a question about, as governor, you get the ability for judicial appointments. And I just want you to clarify for the followers and the listeners, who specifically a governor appoints in the judicial branch, because the voters vote for the Superior Court level judges. If you could, it's kind of a two-part question. If you could clarify who you appoint, and then instruct voters who you think like an ideal judicial nominee or candidate would look like.
Yeah, so it's kind of a mixed system in California. The governor appoints the Supreme Court justices as well as Court of Appeals justices, and in some instances, the Superior Court judges as well. And then the ones that he appoints at the higher levels are subject to sort of a voter referendum over fixed periods of time. So it's kind of a hybrid system. But, the long and short of it is the governor does get to make a lot of appointments. And the folks that I would appoint are those who respect the Constitution, who have a proper understanding of the role of a judge. It's to set the parameters for our politics. It's not to, participate in our politics. It's to, I think one of the analogies you hear is an empire calling balls and strikes. I think that when you have judges who seek to, make the policies themselves, that's where you get into a lot of trouble.
You sound like a fellow Federalist Society member like myself.
That's right. Absolutely.
The way you talk about judges. So there's a bill I saw, and it's kind of been lingering around, SB 742. It's a bill that Senator Richard Pan introduced, and it restricts the right of protesters to protest near vaccination sites. It had gone to the assembly. I don't know if you want to comment on that, what your thoughts on are whether it's an infringement on someone's First Amendment rights. under the U.S. or California Constitution.
Well, that hasn't come to any of my committees, so I haven't read the bill yet. But based upon the way you describe it, it sounds to me like something that would be very concerning from a First Amendment perspective. To say that, you know, we're going to limit your right to protest based upon the content of what you're protesting, that's sort of the core principle of the First Amendment, is that the content of your speech is not a legitimate basis for government-imposed restrictions.
I would definitely agree with that. I just thought I wanted to get your opinion since you have the insider knowledge about it. I'm sure you saw the video yesterday that there was sort of a frantic interview that Gavin gave where he seemed a little like unhinged about what's going on. It seemed like he's getting tired of being questioned. He brought up a point about the middle class in California gets taxed less than those who are in the middle class in Texas. Do you want to comment on that?
I think that any, analysis would show that to be false, that California has the highest tax burden of any state. And you can look at that across, many dimensions of our tax structure. I mean, let's take gas taxes, for example. California has the highest gas tax in the country. And do we get beautiful roads in return? No, we have among the worst roads in the country. The overall cost of living here is the highest in the country, or at least in the continental United States. It's why we have the highest level of poverty in the United States. We have the highest level of inequality, our second highest, I believe, in the United States. We have over a third of our population is on Medicaid. It's middle class and working families who are the ones leaving California. When you talk about the California exodus, you kind of hear about these big names like Elon Musk or the big companies, but really the folks who are leaving tend to be working in middle class families. And so it just shows you how unbelievably out of touch this governor is.
So last of my personal questions, and then if you want, we can take some more listener questions, submitted questions. There's this new fear of these downloadable ballots. I don't know if you've heard about them or not. And a lot of people have been asking about, it looks like you can go online and download ballots and mail them in or drop them off. I wanted to first get your take on this, maybe if there's clarification on what that is. And are you concerned about any sort of voter fraud, ballot harvesting, that in California to stop this recall?
Yeah, so I've heard a lot about the downloadable ballots the last couple of days. To be honest, I haven't had the chance to really research the issue closely. I mean, obviously, it's a very odd and concerning notion if this is true, but I don't have a great answer for you right now on what exactly is going on, but I've certainly heard a lot about it. As far as the broader question, I would say that we know that they've already been cheating. Look at what they've done with the bill to actually change the date of the recall. Just about a month ago, Gavin Newsom signed a bill to change California's election laws so as to move the date of the recall to a date when he thought he would have a better chance of winning. That's not mere speculation. That's actually what the people who were pushing this said, is they think they'd have a better chance of winning if they moved the date. So they did it. They changed the rules of the election in the middle of the election. That's the textbook definition of cheating. And so when you see them cheating in plain sight, I think a lot of people are like, gee, I wonder what is going on behind closed doors. To which I would say that, I think the Election Integrity Project, as well as Rick Grinnell's group, Fix California, they've made election integrity one of their planks as well, are doing the best work on this front. They're trying to bring lawsuits strategically. They're trying to clean up voter rolls. They're recruiting poll workers to go and have an eye on things. And so for folks who have that concern, I would suggest you check out their work, as well as just saying, if you have any lingering doubts, we just need to make sure, that's all the more reason we need to work even harder to make sure we win this election by a lot.
Yeah, and I always like that in the attack ads now, they like to advertise the number 276 million, which they don't mention that the Democrats themselves raised the price tag of the election by moving it up. But that's typical for attack ads. So some questions.
Ballots, yeah.
Yeah. So some questions submitted by listeners or followers. Somebody asked, will you declare a state of emergency on homeless issue?
That's something I would, I guess, look at to do perhaps on a regional basis. I would be, reluctant to overuse the mechanism of a declared emergency because we've seen what that has wrought during the COVID-19 era. I mean, really, a state of emergency is meant to be to respond to something like a hurricane or an earthquake or even a medfly infestation in order to have a targeted and aggressive response, marshaling the resources of the executive branch. And so this idea that we can just declare emergencies in order to be able to have the governor, run the state on his own is something I'd be hesitant to embrace. But that being said, you do need to be, I think, creative and aggressive in using executive authority strategically in the narrow frame of time that we'll have before the next election. And so I would certainly look at all options as far as how we can make progress very quickly.
You're a former prosecutor, and someone asked, what would you do to combat gangs here in California?
Well, it's a great question. And not only am I a former prosecutor, but I'm a former high school teacher in inner city South Central Los Angeles. And, I got to experience the sort of the full breadth of issues that are associated with in underserved communities, one of which is the problem of gangs and how, it is in many cases a huge impediment to the life success of young people and gets them on the wrong track. And so, and then of course to the effect it has on public safety and the safety of our communities. And unfortunately, California has been moving in much the opposite direction. There's been a lot of legislation and action by the governor that has, made it more difficult to break up gang activity. Some of the gang-related enhancements, for example, they've gone after those. And so I would certainly seek to reverse those sort of changes and, to bolster the capacity of our law enforcement to deal with not only gang activity, but the full breadth of criminal activity that is on the rise in California.
Someone asked, what are your thoughts about the high-speed rail, and what would you do about it should you become governor?
Well, my thoughts on the high-speed rail is that it is one of the biggest disasters in United States history when it comes to a waste of taxpayer dollars. This thing has been going on for many, many years. We just keep throwing billions and billions of dollars at it. No real meaningful progress is being made. The price tag is, by some estimates, could be $100 billion now. Even if it does somehow get built, it'll be several generations behind other high-speed rail systems. It'll be the world's slowest and most expensive high-speed rail system. It'll cost more to ride on than a Southwest airline ticket. Gavin Newsom has done this bait and switch, by the way, or he said we were going to, pare it back and just have one link, in Central California. But, now they're saying, oh, no, we're going to build that. Then we're going to build the rest of the project. And this ignores, by the way, the fact that we have decaying roads and we have, other technologies on the horizon like Hyperloop that actually would probably be a lot more promising if they come to fruition. So what would I do about it? Well, I would not sign any legislation that included funding for high-speed rail. The cap and trade bill, for example, which is a huge off-budget revenue stream, billions of dollars. The one item, the largest line item every time those funds get dispersed is high-speed rail. And I would certainly make that no longer the case if I could.
Someone asked your stance on the new hospital regulations only allowing vaccinated visitors or negative COVID test visitors.
Well, I'm against all of these mandates that Gavin Newsom is imposing. And, he's imposing mandates that no other state in the country is. And it's of a piece with the way he's handled COVID-19 is he's imposed the harshest restrictions of any state. And there is absolutely no evidence it's done us any good. So I would roll back all of these mandates and put trust in citizens and personal liberty and freedom and privacy back at the center of our state's governance.
A couple other questions, and then I'll let you go because I know you got to get back to work. Somebody said, do you support private homeschooling families when you talk about school choice?
100%. I've been fighting, the battles against efforts to target private homeschool families at our Capitol. We actually defeated a bill a few years ago that would have gone after them in all kinds of ways, created this ominous oversight commission, and would have even potentially allowed for fire inspections for them to come into your homes. And it was actually, it was the thousands of families who came and protested who actually stopped that bill in its tracks. And so absolutely, I will defend the rights of homeschool families in every way I can.
Let's see. As always, somebody wants to ask about Second Amendment rights here in California.
Well, the Second Amendment rights in California are, among the are face the greatest, intrusions of any state in the country. Every year they come up with new ways to violate our Second Amendment rights. I mean, I have a perfect voting record from the Second Amendment advocacy groups in California, and I would seek to, put us on a much better path towards actually respecting the rights of law-abiding gun owners, rather than, we take the opposite approach now, where it's like we don't actually enforce the criminal laws against those who are committing acts of violence, or at least we're lessening penalties, but then we're making criminals out of ordinary citizens. I would seek to completely change that paradigm.
Let's see. And then one last question came in. Gas tax by the mile, which is being proposed down here in San Diego County, but it seems to be a new trend with Democrats, is taxing by the mile.
Well, of course, it's just another way to try to get more tax revenue. I would 100% oppose it. We already have the highest gas taxes of any state in the country. What we need to do is actually spend the revenue that we have in a much, much more efficient manner. Stop diverting it to the general fund and to other spending projects, and to actually, reform our government's performance so it doesn't cost us 4 times as much to build a mile of road as other states.
Great. Well, we're about at the 20-minute mark, a couple seconds over. So I wanted to take the time to thank you for coming on. I don't want to take up too much of your time. And good luck in the campaign. I also want to thank you for featuring me in my first campaign ad. I saw that on Instagram. So that was, that was funny. I don't know if you had any part of that. And then someone also commented this morning on Instagram Live that you and I share the same haircut. And I said, I don't know who got it first. So maybe Kevin's copying me, or maybe I'm copying Kevin. But
great minds think alike, or at least
great minds do think alike.
Similarly.
All right, Kevin.
Thanks very much.
Assemblyman, thank you for coming on, and thank you for answering questions, and best of luck on the campaign trail. All right.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.